Hey folks, and welcome to a Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we'll sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing All Quiet on the Western Front, directed by Lewis Milestone, Sweet Smell of Success by Alexander McKendrick, Loving Vincent by Dorota Kobiela and Hugh Welchman, Vesper by Christina Boyzeit and Bruno Samper, and finally, newly released, All Quiet on the Western Front, directed by Edward Berger. It's going to be a great show, so stay tuned and enjoy. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Tommy boy, how's it going?
So going okay on this end, man. How was your array of movies this week? We're out of the spooky month.
Oh, we are full out of the spooky month, and you know how this week went. It was pulling teeth.
He had it written all over his face when he walked in the room today, folks.
I said to myself, "Oh boy, this is I don't know. I not burnt out, but it was pulling teeth to get the 5 done this week. But let me tell you, it was a very special week because these are some very special films we get to talk about. So,
and that's already good sounding because we go through. I love it that we got a 1930s to 22 film.
Yeah.
Also, kind of makes sense the way we're capping everything.
Yeah.
Starting and capping the episode off.
Absolutely.
Do you want to just get into it right away?
Sure.
Okay. So, folks, this is going back to 1930. This is one of the biggest, really, movies of early cinema. This is the original All Quiet on the Western Front, directed in 1930. The book came out, I believe, in 1929.
Yep.
And what do we get with this adaptation here? Like I said, it's one of the biggest for the time.
Yeah.
It's still widely renowned. It has some of the best Oscar wins, or the original Oscar wins. How does it hold up, and what do we get?
Yeah, so this one I found myself very curious to check out after watching our new release this week, the 2022 remaster or remake that Netflix released for All Quiet on the Western Front. Mainly because, the film history that it represents. This film was made, as you said, Tom, only 1 year after the main novel in the same name. It was the 3rd annual Oscars winner for Best Picture and Best Director. Credit to Lewis Milestone for having such an early win, but I really found myself asking a very genuine question of, is this worth your time? So I was like, all right, that's evidence enough that I need to just jump and watch this film. And story-wise, the concept here is near identical. We follow a group of young German boys whisked up by the promise of glory. Soon after them joining in on this, the Western Front will define their lives physically, mentally, and kind of regardless of whether they escape the shells of war or not. This film is, and this novel is something incredible because it is so staunchly anti-war for the time. It's also, as I've commented, I've always happy to plug the Fred Astaire movies for February, but it's kind of surreal to watch these films after World War I, but also before World War II, and how things are just talked about. It really is a time capsule for that reason.
And it's almost like when you read the book, it could almost be after World War II, and you can have the same exact book written just after the war, rather than this being in 1929 when the book came out. Yeah, the book banned in so many European countries, Germany and Italy, and just
burnings for Germany.
Yeah. Just kind of going back, it's so crazy to have a 1930 be such an epic after such a big time war film, and like you said, anti-war film, and it's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
How is
both of these are just real long movies. I won't say epics because that's kind of not the point to be epic.
That's true. But
yeah, the big boys.
Yeah. I mean, for 1930, how was this production? How did it keep you interested in 19 or for 2.5 hours? You know, as far as sound and dialogue use and just sets that were used and everything like that.
I think the production is actually the highlight for me. We see a surprising amount of engaging combat scenes for no less a 1930s film, but also probably one of the first true war films that would be produced at the time. And I would say primarily this goes towards just the sheer abundance of extras on the screen. They're just able to do so much with so many living bodies, and obviously there is no chance that this is special effects or anything like that. You know, there's just a scale to this that is just very enjoyable to watch, and it's almost impossible to say, oh, this is combat that holds up to modern productions of war or anything like that, because unfortunately it's not going to be the case here. I think most of all, what dates the production of action in this is that there's a lot of sped up footage in this film. And yeah, amateurish today to speed up footage like that through editing.
Yeah.
It's obviously an easy trick back in 1930 to, one of the few editing tricks they probably had to speed things up. I think that's where it looks the most dated, but there's a lot of surprising elements. For instance, about 40 minutes in, there is a great action sequence in this original one where we're finally in the trenches of war on the Western Front. It may sound simple, but the way it's shot is that there's this simple dolly of the camera that is just going right across the screen, across the entire length of whatever this set that they built for the trench. And it's just a good way to show, sped up footage or not, just how big this trench warfare was, how large and how expansive. And
it represented scale really well.
Yeah.
Which I think also you could actually say was better back in the day.
Sure.
Where they would be on huge sets.
Yeah.
You know?
And all those extras, I think that is something I give credit to, because it's impressive, to watch and also think about the production of how they wrangling, it's herding cats, basically, all those extras.
I believe,
in uniform. And
I think most of the a lot of the extras were real World War I vets.
Really?
Used.
Wow.
Yeah, he really wanted some things to be exact, or exactly if he had this group of people that were supposed to be doing something, he wanted the people that actually did it in real life.
Yes. And I think there's a lot of credit that I put towards this film being such again, it's only 1 year before the novel comes out.
Yeah.
I'll make this comparison later on, but there's a great film post-World War II called The Best Years of Our Lives that is a similar type of approach. It's not exactly anti-war like All Quiet on the Western Front, but there is a shared sentiment of kind of post-trauma that these soldiers are facing. And I think a lot of credit goes towards this being such a fresh perspective coming off of the war.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of realism that I can't even appreciate to the sets or to the environments and the atmosphere that are put out there, and you're only going to get from the realism of maybe some veterans or some actual soldiers from the war being on production with this. I would say there's a great opening title in All Quiet on the Western Front 1930 that explains the point of the story flawlessly. It says the story is not an accusation or confession, and least of all an adventure. I mean, that kind of eliminates a lot. he's striking it out. But it does kind of tune you into the fact that it's about war itself. Though we're obviously focusing with individual characters, it's about critically examining the fantasy of war, the fantasy of glory. And again, I mean, this is some biting criticism, there's some biting commentary coming directly from the original author being a World War I vet and being so again, fiercely against war of any kind, and trying to show the damage it's doing to youth specifically.
Yeah, which you can imagine. I mean, especially for someone who was on the lines and someone who gets it, it's certainly it's understandable.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, I mean, the story and focus of being an anti-war film around World War I is pretty compelling, and for both of these films, I was driven by it. This film has a floor kind of on how low my rating will go, because I really do find that there is such a wonderful execution to the story itself and what the story, the message it has to tell, whether it is back in the 30s or whether it's in modern day, being pushed out by Netflix. But I would say there are some gripes here because this is a very old film and was showing some age for sure. I would say most of all is just the tone bounces back and forth between very chipper and upbeat, and then transforms on the war front to shatter these illusions of glory for these young men. That is absolutely the focus of story in both of these. I would say, I have to be honest though, the chipper side on this interpretation of the film, or of the story, is just a bit hard to swallow sometimes. There's a scene where the soldiers see some French ladies walking by, and they are just so they're so provoked and absolutely in love with these women because they haven't seen anything close. Right. Actually, a plot point in both of the films is taking a poster of a woman and pinning it to their trench just to kind of build some sort of morale, some sort of hope for life. A perfect example of where I found this tone just to be conflicting in this first one, it comes right after one of the most emotional scenes where our main character, Paul, just stabbed someone in close quarters. And it's just
the balance is not there.
Yeah, it's just like, okay. I mean, I fully get the message of the dark side of war. I feel like it was just cheapened by how they layered it and how they edited it here.
It's okay to take you on that roller coaster, but it can't be so jarring. It can't be so back to back.
Yeah. At minimum, it feels like the soldiers are just unaffected by the scenes we were just shown by the audience.
Sure.
And I would say at worst, it delivers a polar opposite of the intended message of being anti-war, that maybe there's camaraderie and maybe there's brotherhood in this war, and maybe that's still something that, you should enlist for, which is not the point of this story in any way. This is the most anti-war story you could get, so... There's also a great scene, I think, where the dialogue of this original shines better than the remake, where they're talking about, why are we fighting this war in the scene? And it's another great example of good content awkwardly placed in this film. It's a tough dice roll for me. This film has almost universal praise both then and now, and I'll be honest, it's just the acting that pulls a good movie down a bit for me. Don't get me wrong, having the variance of happy moments with the soldiers contrasted by the horrors of war, it does effectively convey the point of the story. However, as the film progresses, the upbeat moments grow more and more inappropriate and again, kind of cheapen the message a little bit.
How was sound as far as dialogue goes? Like, was 2.5 hours, was it heavy on dialogue, and how was it captured?
Much heavier on dialogue than our 2022 remake.
Yeah.
And I would say in general, the dialogue was better. I didn't notice any kind of audio fragments
like
that were overdubbing or anything like that.
Okay. So syncing was okay. It was picking up in real time in the field. Okay.
And I think this was, this film is so beloved and such a classic. Again, third Oscar winner, basically. So I think that the attention to maybe give this some love on re-releases, porting it to digital, it probably got some more love than another 1930s film that is out there. And different than from some of the older films that we were talking about recently in October as well, this is not a silent film in any sort of way.
Totally different film.
There's a lot of dialogue.
Totally different than the last two we've done. This old.
Exactly. Don't think that this is a silent affair. If anything, again, to the detriment of this chipper acting, there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of talking in this. So, kind of going back to some of my notes with the production, specifically action sequences. It's very impressive, actually, the explosion and practical effects work.
Okay.
Again, I think just because I realized that they're really detonating something. I mean, it's not it's not shrapnel or anything like that, but they're detonating something on a film set, and there's a lot of this here. It is impressive to look at, and I think it's very convincing, specifically for a 1930s film. I look at an individual explosion, and I'm not saying, oh, that doesn't look real. No, it looks real. So
because it was, real practical old school effects.
Right? People might have gotten injured. Who knows? But yeah, I think the film is also strategic in turning away from some action. In some part, I think really is a blessing to watching it in modern day. I had to do some research into this. This film belongs into a part of pre-code movies. Pre-code movies are like kind of pre-rating or any kind of critical rating to it.
Yeah, I was seeing this term also.
Yeah.
It's pre-rating, but ratings didn't really start until 68.
Yeah, I guess this period in time of these films that come out, they're saying that no one had any. I mean, they were just kind of released by the studios without any sort of review or anything like that. And obviously, not talking about like the quality of it. We're talking about content and severity of it. It's just interesting. I was not experienced with that.
No, so. And I will say, even with all the other older films we did, even recently, that pre-code is the first time I read it.
Yeah, or
it came up, and it was all quad on the Western Front.
Yeah, exactly. So
let's look into it a little bit more.
Yeah. When it comes to this, I think the film though is strategic in maybe they could have gone really against the wall and had a lot to give us in violence and gore and whatnot, but I think the decision to cut away from gore and violence is so smart here because those up-close effects are the ones that are not going to hold up, and they're not really shown here. So maybe that was some foresight into, they probably couldn't pull off the practical effects needed there for the severity of it.
Right.
And the film doesn't really have it. You could look at this and say, well, it doesn't really have the punch, it doesn't really have the, the horrors of war. But at the same time, I think the film is not putting itself out there in a way that is going to damage its own look. It's not going to show us things that are going to look aged. If anything, there was an intentional cutting away of certain points.
Yeah, it punches enough back then, especially with that kind of stuff. They really want to make the horror set in by action reaction type of deal. They don't need to see it, or they don't really want to show it.
Yep.
Sometimes it was just done because it wasn't, especially 1930, it was not tasteful at the time to do anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll wrap this up just because all these are probably going to go long this week. The last 20 minutes of the film really had me hooked here, and it really made up for a lot of my gripes of that this focus of the tragedy of war was being pulled away from, and it's cranked up to what I wanted the film to be, maybe throughout the entire experience, but still it's there for the end. And like I said already, I think I would recommend this film for those that have seen, or maybe even haven't seen, Best Years of Our Lives from 1946. Both films have a value of being a glimpse into war not so long after its close. Both of these stories kind of juggle the traumatic intensity of war, not by showing it directly. We're not seeing as much frontlines footage or combat sequences as maybe modern audiences would like, but instead we have a more personal journey for those lucky enough to survive. We're going to go ahead and give All Quiet on the Western Front, 1930, a 74.
Ooh, 74, better than what I thought.
Really?
74 is a pretty good score there.
Listen, I don't know if the ghosts of critics past will haunt me, but I mean, this film really does get universal praise,
Oh, yes, it does. Yeah, big time. But even for here and now, 74%, that's a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe all the more so because it's from 1930 on the dot.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. 2.5 hours long.
An old film, yeah.
Some fun facts. It's ranked number 7th on American Film Institute's greatest film epics.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
It was the third top grossing film of 1930.
The third?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Some sources said it was the second, but I went back and saw the numbers. It was the third.
Okay.
Second film, Check and Double Check, was the second highest
Never
grossing.
heard of it.
Comedy.
Okay.
First one is Whoopee! Exclamation point.
Whoopee! Okay.
Top grossing film in 1930. Whoopee.
Oh, nice.
Also a comedy.
Yeah. In the 30s, they needed something to pick them up. I mean, they were. This was bad.
But good, and like I said, I'm really glad that you did that this week to pair it along with the one that just came out.
It was such a real moment that I was just saying, "Is that worth your time?" And I was like, "Okay, I gotta." If I'm asking that question, I think that's good.
And I'm glad you watched it because it's 74. It is.
Yeah.
Now, whether it pairs well. Whether it's double feature status, maybe we'll get into that a little bit later.
I think that's a very sad double feature.
Bad day. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump to 1957, which I love, hitting the 50s as we...
Hitting the 50s, that's
are they
exactly
good?
why it's on the list.
Do the 50s have any good films for Vin? We'll find out. This is Sweet Smell of Success. This is directed by Alexander Mackendrick.
Yep.
What brought you to this, and how was it? Set it up a little bit for us.
Sure. So Sweet Smell of Success, it landed on my radar because of the Monroe episode that we did, and Tony Curtis from Some Like It Hot is in this as basically the main character. It's kind of a split lead. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head, Tom. It's I saw this and I said, I'm going from 1930 to 2017. I need something in the middle here. So 57 was the middle point. And man, I got to take a moment. Tom, let me tell you, this film was fantastic.
Really?
I
Okay.
was so in love with this. I rented it originally. I then, after watching it, bought it immediately. And then rewatched it the next day just
Really?
to solidify. That's where I was saying. I mean, it was pulling teeth for this week, and it was a late week of watching.
Yeah, it was pulling teeth, not because it was just
It was just
you didn't have a lot of time to watch these. Yeah.
One of the balancing acts.
Yes.
For sure. But boy, this is a special movie.
Really?
Yes.
And the only reason why you decided to watch it was because you wanted something in between 30 and 17.
Yep.
And this had a loose connection to Marilyn Monroe.
Yep. Bingo.
So did you know that it was highly rated?
No,
by critics?
that was after my first watch, and I try to stay as fresh as possible when it
great.
comes to these.
So you watched it and you were like, boy, this is a good movie.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is like
why don't people know
amazing.
about this?
And exactly. Yeah. And obviously I was on IMDb, so I was like, again, I saw no Oscar wins, no real Academy recognition. So I was like,
nominated for one BAFTA. That's it.
What's going on here? And then I just saw that the love for this film is immense, and really did, cement my feelings already. But man, this was a cool, fresh, not at all 50s movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, it's a 50s movie, but not in the way that I'm concerned with a 50s movie.
Yes.
If anything, this was going to be one of the many that will add to the Kane Mutiny pile that I was probably going to say, probably not.
You almost figured it would just, chuck it on the Kane Mutiny, but yeah.
Exactly.
So it's an hour and 36. Like you said, Tony Curtis. He's also going alongside Burt Lancaster here.
Mm-hmm.
What do we get with these two guys?
So yeah, Sweet Smell of Success puts us up front and center in a ultra fast-paced, high-pressure world of press agents in Manhattan. Most of the story takes place at night, with the city being busy and jazz blaring over information traded for shady favors. This is very much a story about bad people, about snakes. Okay. Everyone is an absolute snake in this, and that's where I was like, hey, this is not
typical 50s.
Yeah, this is not squeaky clean.
And for those people wondering, I don't know if just for some of those people who didn't catch those other episodes that we talk about the 50s, the problem with 50s is it's post-World War II, everything's squeaky clean, everything is just chipper men and guys and gals and you know what I mean?
Upbeat and no I mean, there's conflict in these films, but
not much adversity, and there's just tones that are completely different in the 50s as a whole, and it's so much is because of that coming off of the World War, Second World War.
Absolutely.
So right away, the fact that we're dealing with not good people is a good sign, really.
It's so good. I was walking into this and I was expecting maybe something similar to Mad Men, maybe something similar to Glengarry Glen Ross, where there's the focus is business prowess as the content, but I was so wrong. This film is so much more than that. Our focus are two cutthroats in the press agent business. We have Sidney Falco by Tony Curtis, a Weasley man that will literally do almost anything for information or a buck on the street. And I really mean that, like literally anything. In a great line, actually, from Burt Lancaster, who is our next lead. He calls him a cookie full of arsenic, and I really like that. That was a perfect little description of this character. Our next lead is J.J. Hunsaker, played by Burt Lancaster. J.J. Hunsaker is a powerful information broker in the city that runs both a newspaper but also a nightly talk show. I think I found one of the earliest Oscar snubs, honestly, with this performance, because wow, is Lancaster flawless. Cool, exactly what you want in a villain, exactly what you want out of His character performance, I'll talk about dialect and dialogue in a little bit. It brings it all home. I mean, just phenomenal. And like I said, this is a story about snakes, absolute snakes. It is hysterical to me because it couldn't be farther from my assumptions about the 50s being squeaky clean. And it is a movie of entirely horrible characters that are immoral and irredeemable. But it takes something that is relatively small scale in plot and makes a fascinating story through the tangled knots of what the little games are between each of these characters. And it really is something special. I am dying to talk about this story, but like I said, it is relatively small in scale. So let me rave about some of the execution here. Mm-hmm. I think this has a wonderful feel to the city streets. The city takes on a new facade at night, an aesthetic of movers and shakers where information is dealt for cash and favors. Our eyes are on the characters that control it all. JJ is obviously the leader of his own kind of news circuit, Sydney being an agent under him, but also an agent to many news circuits. We get exposed to a lot of the movers and shakers in the scene, if you will. The jazz is fast-paced. It matches the manic feel of this night world that is kind of introduced to this press circuit. It really is. Most of the scenes take place exclusively at night in Manhattan.
I mean, that could be a little. Is it electric? You know?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. It's so good. And credits to the jazz itself. Elmer Bernstein composes here, and is just such a. I mean, maybe it sounds like an insult, but it's just such a sleazy sound to the characters. It's like really, really sleazy, sounding jazz. It's good. It's really good. I was enjoying it quite a bit. But I think what is a key component. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can't stress enough. This film was phenomenal. A key component here is the dialect and the dialogue of this. We talked about dialect recently, and here it's a strength to the dialogue by having such a slick talk of this late 50s New York setting. It immediately transports you there.
Yeah.
Most of the incredible dialogue falls on Lancaster's character, JJ, as he speaks in this mix of academic press speak and like jive lingo. It's such a great characterization for him because not only does it show this character needs to hang with all types to get the news, to get the info of the street. He needs to, hang with senators, but he needs to hang with the shady pimps as well. Right. On top of that, it shows that he's using this confusing dialogue, this confusing lingo to always stay superior of who he's talking to. He's always faster. He's always slicker. It just puts us right front and center without any blocky exposition, without any info dumps. If anything, I mean, at a breakneck pace, we're put into this slick press world of Manhattan, and it is just... It transports you there perfectly. I mean, really, perfection. It's so good. So good. And I think, when we talk about something being dated, in this case, this film, yes, it was dated, but it transported us there. And I think that's very different than, watching in modern day. Can you be transported there? Fantastic. If watching in modern day is it pulling teeth, that's a different thing entirely. Absolutely.
And it's dancing on a knife's edge a little bit, you know? And if this is just a straight portal to this era, to Manhattan, that's awesome. It's fun. It's great. Yeah,
it's so good. And obviously, this story is fictional, so I'm sure there are some hyper stylized elements of this information broker type of world, this night world. Yeah, I just can't tell you though. I was just so enraptured in it. It was so good.
And like you said, it's quick and it's snappy, and it is an hour and 36, which I'm sure just helped it too. That much more.
Did not overstay its welcome, and that's where the story is a little bit smaller. We're not having the world isn't ending, right. As I feel like I have to talk about with every superhero film. You know what I mean? Right. We can't just tell a small story anymore. You know what I mean? So, and this is a small story of just everyone sticking knives and twisting knives in each other, and it's just, man, Really good.
Yeah.
Really good. I would say the cinematography might be my biggest personal highlight. Very Scorsese, or rather vice versa. The camera will have short but precise movements to signify focus. It reminds me a lot of Whiplash or Birdman with how it jumps to the music in time as well. The jazz here is really dictating the pacing, the cadence of the editing on screen. And let me tell you, folks, how impressive that is to be comparing a 1957 movie in editing to something so modern as Whiplash or Birdman. Again, really in love with this. Early on, a great example of this, JJ has a scene where he is advising a politician, a senator, on the company he keeps. This character, again, he's throwing out a lot of slang, it's almost he's intentionally confusing. He's trying to manipulate every conversation with the slang he throws out there. And he accuses the senator he accuses his company, these two other people that are sitting at the table, of, hey, you should not be keeping them with your company. You should not be socializing. You should not be seen with them. And what the camera move does is, as he's making this accusation, it does a slight little refocus on the two people he's accusing, and just pans across, just very simply back to the senator, and we're just sitting on his reaction of kind of a real talk JJ is giving to this guy, no less in front of the people that he's saying, hey, kick him to the curb. That little moment there, again, perfection is the word, because the cinematography is just like, man, it's not overstated, but it's also not afraid to move around. This camera here is not what I would say is typical of the 50s, which is going to be very typical blocking. Yeah. Everything is static. Yep. We're one single room. Obviously, that plays into a lot of set work that they're doing at the time. So this camera was moving around intentionally and only when it needed to. And again, I can't speak highly enough about it. It's so good. A real credit to the film if you're watching in modern day. I don't, give praise, like I said, to things how they were, but if a thing can take you to how it was in its execution, I think that is something special. And the dialect, the performances, the atmosphere to the film creates a authentic and genuine feel to this seedy New York press circuit. I was enraptured with it. It was so good. Let me be real here. The amount of films that I have been watching lately has left me a little numb. I'm watching so many movies that in kind of a mental exercise, I was a little bit worried that, sure, I can recognize a great film, but can I enjoy a great film? This also was compounded that I saw an interview with Orson Welles, and obviously he's like a drunk, he's got like some, he's a meme of himself online. And Orson Welles, in this interview, he said, save for movie lovers, save the passion of watching for only the great films. And this kind of just compounded, and I'm sure I can call heads or tails if something is great. Yeah. I can make sense of it, but can I enjoy it as great? And let me tell you, here comes along this little jazzy 50s movie with no awards to its name, and it shows me how silly my concern was, because this film was no doubt great and truly a great watch as well. We're going to go ahead and give Sweet Smell Success an 89.
Woo! Wow! Hey!
It was so good.
Big boy alert, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
And I think, and honestly, it is a lot of films a week. It's around 250 a year. But you still, look at this reaction here.
Yeah.
Same reaction, basically, to when you watched Fargo.
Sure.
Which you watched in the podcast. You know what I mean? It's the thing about watching so many films is it makes these great films stick out even more, I think. And even
think
that
so.
much more of a punch in the face.
Yeah.
And almost that much more obvious.
Yeah.
And 89 is a phenomenal score, and I think it's the best we've given on the podcast yet.
Probably, and I think, if anything, because this is such an old film, I really go out and watch it, because you will be shocked how electric, how fast-paced it is, how not boring. It is the farthest from boring possible.
It's a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Because I got to tell you, I think on this, really, there's, what do we have? Like I said, around 850 films-ish, something like that. And I think there's 10, maybe 11 in the 90s.
Right.
and I think you gave Fargo an 88.
Yeah.
So this Sweet Smell of Success, people, don't sleep on it.
Yeah.
And seek it out is what it seems
It
like.
It was definitely an 80s without a doubt on the first watch, but again, just diving in deeper, and again, just kind of just falling in love with how effortlessly the film just puts you in its own world.
So you went from running out of time to watch 5 movies to watching 6.
Arguably 7, because Netflix All Quiet was definitely some rewatch material. That one's a long one, though.
That's pretty good. Wow.
Went from no time to making time.
Yeah. 89%. It is, I think, the best one we've had on the podcast yet, folks. So don't sleep on Sweet Smell of Success. Wow. I think I'm shocked.
I was shocked.
I mean, like you said,
shatters the expectation for 50s movies.
Yeah. I mean, it flips it completely on its head.
Yeah, I almost said I probably can't even have the assumption of the squeaky clean 50s anymore.
And what a nice surprise of you seeking it out for such a weird reason.
Yeah.
You needed some sort of middle of the, trying to find one in this around these decades.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was the loosest connection to past podcasts that we've done.
I know. Because I wasn't even digging like Tony Curtis as an actor in Some Like It Hot.
Incredible. I mean, is there any comparisons you can make? Now, you said you brought up Birdman, you brought up Whiplash with maybe a little bit of the way the cinematography or the camera work, but any comparisons, because it's so still fresh and electric, any comparisons to modern day movies, or does it have a Mad Men feel, or this Mad Men doesn't even touch this?
I think it roughly touches it, because again, it is kind of transporting us into a specific, profession within the time period. So very much still the same. I think the execution couldn't be farther from it. And again, it's more so with our characters and how they are characterized by doing and what we see them do, rather than just us saying, we needing an info dump or needing exposition to get us up to speed on the character.
I love it. Okay.
We see them be snakes. There's a reason why I said they're all snakes. We see them be snakes.
Awesome. Once again, folks, Sweet Smell of Success, 89%. Check it out. I'd be interested in checking out the director more. I'd be interested in checking out the cinematographer more, who's just a Chinese guy who started working on the railroads when they first came over.
Really?
He was born in 1899. Yeah.
No way.
He's done some other large-ish films as well.
Wow.
Okay, so
and to be such a highlight, too. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. He also has like 140 cinematographer credits to his name because, classic.
All the old films like that. It was just working actors.
All right, now we'll jump to our 2017 here. Big old jump from 57.
Yeah.
This movie is called Loving Vincent. This is directed by 2 directors I don't know of, Dorota Kobiela and Hugh Welchman. And this is about Vincent van Gogh.
No, it's about me.
Other than that, what do we get with this film, Vin? Kind of why this kind of indie film here?
Yeah, indie film I think is a great way to introduce it.
Yeah.
I have a bias that if I hear my name in the title of a character or something like that, I love it. I get that from my mother, so it's why I love Tom Cruise's character Vincent in Collateral.
Oh wow, okay.
Well, maybe not the only reason, but it's why I'm probably a little bit more tolerant of Tom Cruise then. So. But yeah, this film, to give away the pitch of
more
it.
tolerant than Tom Cruise.
I
would hate to see if his name wasn't Vincent in that movie.
True, and tear it apart.
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, to give away the elevator pitch here, this film is a story around Vincent van Gogh's life, specifically after his death, showing past events and pieces together a mystery around why he committed suicide and what relationships had a role in his final days. The reason why this is on the watch list and the reason why I'd recommend this movie as all is because the notable feature is that it is all painted like an oil painting. It is animated like an oil painting, the entire film.
And it comes across how?
I got a lot of notes on it. We're going to be going along here, folks. It's meaty movies this week. Technically, I believe what we have here is a process called rotoscoping. We mentioned it before, where you're taking footage frames and you're animating physically over them. In this case, that is same principles of animating over the live footage, or just with paint. I have a lot of good and a lot of bad, because this is the primary draw to the film. Couple bullets here. Accomplished by over 100 artists on the team, which is sizable. Maybe not sizable by CGI, size of teams,
Right.
but definitely notable. They pulled this off, this kind of Herculean task of oil painting over every frame of a film.
Yeah.
By having a reduced frame rate to the film. So, a normal frame rate of the film is 24 frames per second. That is the cinematic look, if you will. To create an animation with 24 frames, you are painting 24 different shots
To get 1 second.
and get 1 second. I recognized it as a little bit lower. In research, this is actually boiled down to 12 frames per second, and both kind of a good and bad, a little bit choppy. It looks like.
So did it look like those classic, like, things that were shot in the 19 teens where everything almost looked sped up, but it wasn't sped up? It was
right.
just because you had...
Yeah.
It was blocked up. Did it look weird like that, or was it...
It didn't look weird. I just think when so many scenes are focused on interview segments of just two people talking, it looks quite beautiful. But precise mouth movements, precise...
Little weird.
Yeah, it looks like 12 frames. It looks like half the amount of frames.
Because 24 we can pick up, it looks smooth.
Yeah.
24 is, I forget what the actual rate you hit, whether it's 20, 21 or something like that, where it actually seems like motion rather than chopped up pick images. Interesting that it's 12. I wonder if, like, what was it, 2017? I'm glad that it wasn't just you shoot it on digital and then you put a Snapchat filter on.
Right.
You know, seriously, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
I mean,
for
the work that went behind this is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're not cutting corners. I mean, yes, they have to kind of...
Or are they? Well,
they have to make one big cut as far as the frames that they're committing to,
Right.
but it is inspired as far as what they're doing. So this it makes it feel pretty choppy, but I can't stress enough how gorgeous this movie is, and it really is a sight to behold. I mean, it is a gorgeous looking film. You don't have to be a film enthusiast to imagine the painstaking process of making this. Literally 12 pictures painted for every 1 second of runtime. What's the total runtime on this?
I believe it's an hour and 34.
Yeah, so I mean that's my brain right now isn't doing that mental math, but that's a lot. That's a lot of seconds.
It's a lot. You'd almost you could understand and give it a pass if it was an hour and 5, an hour and 15 or something like that.
Yep.
When you hear that craziness that you have actual 100 painters going through each frame, that's wild.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But very impressive. It's an hour and 34. It's a full feature length film.
Oh yeah, for sure. And especially for certain scenes, having this oil painting style it creates an entirely different feel to the normal sequence. There's a brawl scene, for instance, and just seeing that action has to be blurred with oil paints. Pretty interesting. You know what I mean? I can't say I was having a terrible time with visually what was going on here.
It wasn't, I don't know if this connection is right at all.
Okay.
I get bored with anime a lot.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Sure, yeah. Well, I know you don't.
Okay. My reason,
Maybe.
I can easily fall asleep to anime because it's so much dialogue and so many things are happening with not too much actually happening on the screen.
Okay.
So
fair.
now that you're at 12...
The talking head syndrome.
Right, and now that you're at 12 per second rather than 24, and it looks choppy already, and then you have muddled a picture look already, and so you're not seeing detail, I'm assuming, because you're dealing with an oil painting, kind of.
Yeah.
Was there a disconnect there from viewer to screen? Was it hard to be engaged with the actual... to put yourself there in it? You know what I mean?
I don't think so. I think it is there just story-wise.
Okay.
Because this film is just all exclusively interviews. It's a character post-death of Van Gogh going around to people in his lives that knew him, almost a la Citizen Kane, if you will.
Okay.
And talking about and doing these flashbacks in life. Yeah, just
Makes it a little bit more appropriate then.
Yeah, but it's also, that's where I felt it was a little bit lacking engagement to it. Not necessarily in the oil painting itself then.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
And why I praise this side of it so highly is because this film is, yes, it's visually impressive. Yes, it's a labor of love, but what puts this over the top is it's a story about Van Gogh's life. So having certain scenes reference both his style and specific paintings is an incredible follow-through. Incredible to have that matching. I'm not even an art historian to tell you, oh, yeah, that's Van Gogh's, yada, yada. But you can tell when certain frames are kind of hanging there to, let the audience know that this is a specific reference to a moment in time that Van Gogh painted this, or a specific frame of reference for one of his paintings. So every scene, though, and I got to lean into some of the bad here, not every scene gets the same amount of love as others. There are many, many, many flashbacks in the story that are completely black and white. Color is removed. It is significantly less well done, clearly used to balance out some of the budget and some of the time of the production. By using black and white, the frame is left less painted, I guess I'll say.
Okay.
The brushstroke work is nowhere near as fine-tuned and nowhere near the caliber it is in the full color scenes. There's a lot of these black and white scenes, unfortunately. Like I said, the story is structured like Citizen Kane, that it's almost exclusively interviews and flashbacks to times these characters interacted with Van Gogh's life. These interviews, it's just exclusively narration, and it's a little boring. And then, nonetheless, it doesn't help that every flashback is this black and white, this lesser execution of the idea of every frame being a painting, or an oil painting. And I just think it's a semi-large misstep for the film, because these scenes are presented as payoff for the story, yet they are the most visually boring. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Totally makes sense that they're black and white for purposes of this is a flashback.
Right. Not losing their minds.
But if they're supposed to be the most engaged, and it's the least riveting visually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame, because those are the moments where you're really going to be most glued to the scenes. You find out, hey, what is the mystery around Van Gogh's life? And they're not the most interesting to look at.
You're getting the least detail.
Yeah. I would almost vote for a vice versa. Keep the post-Van Gogh life black and white.
Ooh, that would be cool.
Go back into color. You know what I mean?
Probably would be a little bit easier for him, too.
Yeah.
That would be very cool. Wow. Yeah.
So, I don't know. A gripe I had with the film, overall, Loving Vincent is a balance between 10 out of 10 colored visuals that are masterfully referential to Van Gogh's work. The other side of that is interesting but average black and white scenes doing the heavy lifting in the runtime. I thought this was still a very good movie, but ultimately it was carried by its visuals. I think a great watch if you appreciate animated wonders. I'm talking Fantasia, maybe a Who Framed Roger Rabbit for its novelty of how animation and rotoscoping is used, and then kind of always my recommendation, any kind of Studio Ghibli film on the anime front. The look is elevating the experience. It is the experience, and in that, maybe needs some improvement itself. Still a good movie. We're going to go ahead and give Loving Vincent a 70 on the dot.
Oh, 70, yeah, still good. Glad this movie exists, almost.
Yeah. We're really far-reaching, almost 100 years of a movie watching here.
So this just came out in August. This is called Vesper. We have a sci-fi adventure drama type film here. What is it? Some of the visuals look pretty cool, and you being the sci-fi guy, what do we get? Were you excited by any of this?
Yeah, that's exactly why it landed on my watch list. Some slick sci-fi visuals that caught my eye and landed it on my many lists that I had that I chipped away off of this week. However, the movie is it just has a bad problem with not showing us the most interesting offerings it has, and instead focusing on a smaller, drawn-out scenes that unfortunately show a little bit more of its indie budget than you would let on.
Okay.
I feel like there's a balancing act that this movie fails, because you get super high fidelity, very inspired, cool sci-fi visuals that are arguably 1/10 of the film. And then we're just in rooms and Russian-looking houses, and
the low budget kicks in.
Yeah. Very indie. This is IFC that produces this, which I like some IFC films.
Could you give us a couple more?
Really just IFC the movie channel. So
right. Okay, gotcha.
And everyone's in the game of producing too. I mean, you look at like Shudder and whatnot. I think that was just born from indie type of producing and whatnot of these films. So
I already have something stuck in my head because I'm just sitting here watching the stills, kind of.
Yeah. Would
this be better if it was a short and if it was done by Oat Studio?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, the visuals, they are slick. This landed on my
Some of them look cool,
radar for a reason. There's a cool biology to it and whatnot. But yeah, it's not the focus of the film. And if anything, cut right to the punch of this, this is exactly the problem that I had with Kin a couple weeks back in August when we reviewed it. Actually, probably around the time that this movie came out. That it's like, the movie is about a sci-fi gun. Make it about the sci-fi gun. I was going
to bring up the sci-fi gun.
Yeah, where this is like, it's about cool sci-fi evolution and biology. It is about it, but it doesn't give us the goods. So, in Vesper, we follow Vesper, a curious little girl who has her dad as a robot drone in a post-apocalyptic world. There is a disparaging difference in the quality of life on Earth. Some live in a utopia future society, which unfortunately we never see in the film. And others are in this polluted scrap world. It feels very much, just to make an anime reference, Nausicaa Valley of the Winds. I don't know if you've ever seen Nausicaa.
Yeah, I'm well aware of it.
Yeah, it's a good movie. You should watch Nausicaa. That's going to be the anime special.
It's one of the biggest ones, I know.
Yeah.
All you guys are fans of it. Yeah.
All you guys.
In what ways is it similar, though?
In that it is a little girl discovering this post-apocalyptic world,
and
there being wonder to it, though. You know,
Okay.
there's wonder to the biology, there's wonder to the technology that it is kind of flourishing without humans, which is a cool sci-fi setting. My main issue is that we only see a fraction of this world, and similar, like I said, to the review of Kin, it just does not know how it's bringing the viewer to watch the film in the first place, doesn't know its strengths. Vesper also helps an injured woman from the Citadel, from this have world of this have and have not examination. And once again, it kind of just boils down to sci-fi window dressings, It's not, there's a substantial drama in the performance, but it just kind of like, okay, people are sad now, and we're in a room, but it's not sci-fi. It was a little underwhelming for me. The society that Vesper is a part of is very tribal, very ritualistic. From on this surface scrap world, for instance, our antagonist is like this hillbilly orphan king, which is awesome. But it clearly is a new third ball in style that the film is juggling. And all of these balls are not the cool sci-fi visuals that we're getting, like from a bird's eye, if we look at the many styles, we have this woodsy focusing on nature shots, and that's where we get these gorgeous shots of the design of the new biology and plants, and good CGI as well, good looking. You have the future tech Citadel world that spotlights this, kind of very cliche have and have not, genre or styling to the story. And finally, we have this post-apocalyptic Mad Max scrapper society, and it's just like, it's cool that they're combining all these elements. None are done particularly well.
They make sense that they're together, but
yeah. It honestly,
low budgeted indie kind of.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm not trying to really just needlessly knock this film, but this is speculation, but it really just gave me the feel that they had a concept that would be on like Oats, that would be on something like that, around the CGI, and they tried to make a story out of it, realized they didn't have enough story, and started adding stories to it.
And I can only imagine that because of that, in the hour and 54 minute just kills it, really hurts it.
Absolutely. This is a snoozer. And believe me, I like slow burn. I like slow sci-fi specifically. But no, this was
okay.
Not only I wish I saw it, but I wish I saw the cool sci-fi stuff. But on top of it not really giving you it feels like the payoff isn't there either.
Okay.
But yeah, I have many notes of how much this is a snoozer, but we're gonna go by that because this can be shortened down. I would say I stand by my original assessment that there is stunning visual design here, but being split between the three never really gives us a great payoff. And it's a shame because also the design of these plants and the new biology of the world, it shows us how evolved it is, how Vesper is the master of her own domain, growing up in this and kind of being a child genius, and to not have that as the only focus, I think is again a big miss. It's very typically integrated and has a bad problem with creating payoff for ideas in the film. Things just kind of happen and say, oh, why wouldn't we just introduce this at some point? You know what I mean? Most of all, I would just say the story is lacking. I was curious of all the sci-fi biology. I was curious about the Citadel politics, and believe me, I wanted to see where all the conflict goes, but it all gets lost in the bloated 2-hour runtime that couldn't decide what aspect was the strongest. I can tell you what was the strongest, and that was the cool setting with beautiful visual design and exciting sci-fi nature. I just wish I saw it instead of focusing on a drama of characters that are not the strong setting. We are going to go ahead and give Vesper a 55.
Okay, low point of the week here.
Yeah, definitely low point of the week.
55%. Still above, hey, that's still above the Adam Project.
Very true. Always getting in the jab to Reynolds.
Vesper, so lackluster, should have been shorter.
Yeah.
And more concise, kind of, when you're dealing with that budget.
Yeah.
Leave it cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't cut out cool to
and clearly
boring.
It's a budget thing, but
yeah,
then at that point
totally
don't make it 2
understandable.
hours, you know?
Oh, that's absolutely. Yeah. Okay, all right. Well, you gave it a try.
Listen, that's how you get the gems for sci-fi. You gotta
just
dig
mining through that.
Yeah.
The ore of ever-ending or never-ending sci-fi. That's Vesper for the 55%, folks. So we just want to remind people here, we're going up the value for value model. So we're totally producer-supported. And are you found? If we're providing you value, getting any value from this, from the website, if you could, you go to thedailyratings.com. You go to the donations tab, and through monetary support, you can send in whatever amount that you want, that you feel that you're getting, or whatever amount of value that you feel like you're getting. You send in a note along with it so we can read that on air, ask us questions, give us critiques, comments, whatever. It's a through line to you, and that's kind of how we operate. Again, it's thedailyratings.com. Go to the donations tab, and we thank you all who help produce here at the Daily Ratings. Just want to give another shout out to producer Sean, who's still helping us out on the back end.
Oh, yes.
It's a huge help for us, especially in these past few months where we just not have had time, that's for sure. But with that, folks, we're going to go ahead to our last film here. We alluded to it a bunch of times. This is the all-new Netflix All Quiet on the Western Front. This is directed by Edward Berger, a German director. This is a German cast. It's pretty full German production.
Bingo.
Of All Quiet on the Western Front. Ben, it's a Netflix original. It's not being talked about all too much, but that's also kind of the saturation that we get with
the game of Netflix.
With digital release and Netflix for sure.
Which we've talked about so many times, like, how do they decide what is getting marketing? How do they decide, what you were talking about with the Amazon not too long ago like that.
Exactly. And so with this, we're returning to a very large property here between the book and how huge the original one was. Let's kind of get into the beginnings of these movies. What is setting them apart? Is there a reason to look at this story again?
Sure.
And how is it done in a fresh, new 2022 way?
I think there's absolutely reason to remake it. And it's purely for, again, going back to that 1930s rendition of the film, just a little bit of a lack of consistency in tone. And not only that, war films have come quite a long way in brutality and in spectacle. So I think... this film wasn't really on my radar until you mentioned it. Also, listener of the show, Tyrone, he reached out and kind of was excited for my thoughts on this film as well. So I really wasn't finding myself super excited for this film, but I do think this is a great movie. I think the brutality is definitely worth it here.
And was it not on your film because one, it was on Netflix. Two, it's not being pushed out so much. Or three, this story just wasn't kind of on your radar. Like, are we oversaturated now with a Dunkirk in 1917?
Oh, yeah. I think kind of maybe a mix of all three. And again, almost to the point that I never saw the original. Not that probably a lot of people have at this point.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where, I was excited to watch it, but I found myself a little bit more reluctant to get on board with this film. I will say, though, it is a great movie. Excited to talk about a lot of what's unpacking here in reference to that original film. Like I said, Berger is a German director I have no experience with, and this is the Netflix film purely gunning for award season, I think. I'd be curious to know what the chatter is award-wise. I know it's not being pushed out there so much from a business or from a viewership standpoint, but it seems like an award grab for sure. And that's maybe where it was kind of like, another award grab. I'll probably get to it in a couple months.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, where I was coming from with it. I will say, though, the part of the reason why I did 2 watches on this is, one, because I started it and I had to turn it off because I was both tired and I was kind of in a good mood, and this is definitely not a good mood movie.
And if you're tired, because it's 2.5 hours long.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
2:28.
But I was also really curious. This is a fully German production. This has an English dub, but the original is in German, and I gave a full watch to both of these. I would say, honestly, they are interchangeable. I wasn't saying one has to be the way you watch it. I will say, though, the German is a tiny bit better, and I'll call this like very similar to the movie Downfall, where there's an effect with German language. Downfall is the very famous one with Hitler. It all takes place in the bunker, and you just see Hitler freaking out, and in German, like, he is like yelling.
Right.
He is losing it, and I think very similarly here. But there's just something to hearing all of that German dialogue and hearing the intensity of the language.
Yeah, being in the native language of the book that was written, was supposed to be with Germans.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It wraps you ever more into the realism of the moment, kind of. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll get into, obviously, the big discussion of the film itself. I do want to make a note, say what you will as far as some of these Netflix-produced films, but I think they are undeniably killing the game on the international cross-releases. I would say probably the ultimate example is something like a Squid Games, but even something like RRR that we covered back not too long ago. Netflix is having this effect that, we even covered it on that RRR review on the podcast, that this is getting to countries that would normally not see it. And not only that, it's being supercharged by Netflix's digital platform.
But would you not agree that because it's a Netflix original, this was always meant to have that cross? When you redo All Quiet on the Western Front,
sure,
I feel like you're doing this to get out to all audiences.
Yeah,
when some of the best shows I've enjoyed on Netflix have actually been French shows.
Yeah,
but those were made for French audiences.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I guess my reflection on it is more so, I don't think if this was remade in the German production without Netflix's involvement, I would watch it. So similar to just their international play is very large right now. And I don't see that happening on any other platform, despite Netflix's kind of downturn and everyone calling it doom and gloom.
And I would say you're definitely right on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
And rightfully so, because guess what? I love the film. I thought it was a great movie, and I maybe come across some German film, but it's not something that I'm seeking out myself. I had no idea who Berger was, so yeah. All Quiet on the Western Front, once again, straight from the eyes of the novelist in World War I. A veteran in 1929 released this adaptation. The novel was adapted for both 1930 and then as well. Again, I actually forgot to mention in the other review, 1979 there was another adaptation.
There was. I don't think that got much attention.
Yeah.
I don't think.
It seemed like a more lower end production. I don't know. I didn't do too much research.
I did want to bring up a point to you, so we'll just get it out of the way now.
He's been flirting, or he's been dancing around it long enough.
Yeah. So I watched this.
Yeah, this is unlike anime. This is Tom's type of movie.
This is the Tommy Two Shoes. Yes, this is the opposite of anime for me. Yeah, I totally have a Tommy Two Shoes, but I think it'll be good to open up dialogue right away instead of your review. I hide it and then we do.
Bingo.
This works a little bit more. Looking at the way after watching it, I've just spoiler alert too. I enjoyed it very much as well.
Good.
Why 22? Why 1922 or 2022? You know what I mean? Why not do? Could it have waited for
100th anniversary.
For the 100th anniversary of the film, of the book, do it in 29, do the film in 30. That's all. It just surprised me. It was just like, I don't know, when you have such old intellectual properties like this, there's something about it with me where it's like, let's do it as right as possible. And rather than just it feels good in the moment, burger is there. Does that
absolutely?
Am I the only one who's bothered by that?
No, I think it's a good thing to appreciate because that's follow through in the execution,
right? So, and the reason why it popped up in my head and or to say there is because you said to the 79, where it's just like, hey, 50-year anniversary, somebody took a crack at it.
Oh, good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to that 59 or 79. I think there's a reason why we're not talking about it today.
Yeah. And really for this adaptation, it is 10 times more brutal and feels a lot more authentic as well for what it's worth because of this German audio. I think there's an immersion factor amidst the brutality that is really something that I'm putting a lot of credit into. So again, fine if you watch English dub, fine if you watch German dub. I think both were completely sufficient for the story.
So I did German.
Okay.
Read the subtitles, and they really disappear after a while.
Exactly. Yeah, because this is more combat.
Yeah, when the acting's good, when the film is set up the way it is, it's really quite natural. You're not struggling to see what's happening on screen and to be reading. It's all good. The American dub, though, how were the voices sounded compared to the actors?
They're all British. A perfect example is in our captain character. I'm forgetting the character's name.
Paul?
But no, not Paul. The captain.
Okay.
He sounds very like, all right, mates. It's like very spec op kind of British. I don't know.
Did they seem like? But I want to be when I'm seeing a person on screen so close to their face and them talking, I wanted to at least the voice to be like, okay, that guy could sound like that.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? How was that?
I think so. It's certainly not to the point that it didn't take me out of it.
Okay, which is huge. Okay.
And why I really wanted to test it because I was in love with the German. There's a great, actually, I would say for folks at home, if you have not watched this yet, within the first 20 minutes, the young boys are getting recruited, and there is a kind of an orator, kind of a rallier.
Sure.
It's very impassioned in German. It's also very impassioned in the English dub, but I think that's a quick area, practically speaking, that you can kind of double check it.
Flitch back and forth a little bit, and see what you like
see
more.
what you dig more, and
I would go for German, just like you said.
Yeah.
Just maybe go for the German.
It adds immersion to it, you know what I mean?
Big time.
And so. But, this story is identical of just how extremely anti-war it is. And even being, the novel being, as we noted on the previous review, being banned by Nazi Germany in the years following its release, this is important that the film stays anti-war throughout the whole time. The story has a central theme of the horrors of the promise of glory, or in the promise of glory. The reality of war is horrific, and it's beyond imagination. So focusing on these young boys signing up for enlisting in the service. The film has a great way of presenting this glory of becoming a hero, fighting for one's country. The film examines that fantasy in a critical light through the brutality of World War I, and I can't, it is consistent in examining this in a critical way throughout the entire runtime, and I cannot say that about the original 1930 release.
It's unbelievable how it's unrelenting in how it feels in the anti-warness of it.
Yeah.
My only note that I had is I wish it could have conveyed, because it's not so much it's World War II and you're watching the German lines, so the big thing is they are the ones attacking, you know what I mean? The war could end as soon as the Germans just want to end.
Sure.
But I like that there is the separation of the basic soldier and the higher ups. Sure. My only note was I would have liked to see some even more adversity, some even more evil from the upper echelons, which of course we do get.
Yeah, we get some armchair kind of general stock.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to get that. Yeah. I think it's really important to also see that these German soldiers are just as much
expendable.
Just as
numbers
expendable almost as the other side, basically.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, but to your point of that unrelentlessness, it's crazy that we're in 2022 and you can feel an impact of a war like that or any war like that. I like that it was all German production.
Yeah.
So I have a quote from the director,
Okay.
and it said, "When it comes to both world wars, as a German, there is nothing to be proud of in that part of history. There's only guilt, terror, horror, and a deep sense of responsibility to the past. That's in me. That's in my kids." And I like that there's a sense of deep and undertaking, regret, and absolute loathsome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, to the past wars. And I think it's picked up so well through the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And specifically with World War One, it's relayed in multiple times in the film. They are fighting for meters of land. You know, this is not anything significant.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk about it in because of spoilers, but there's actually a wonderful poetic turn later on in the film that kind of puts a similar valuing of what life is worth, and in the context that the entire war effort was just for a couple meters of ground and not for any kind of substantial gain there, I think is very, very poignant to the point of this film.
Yeah.
So, I would say this anti-war approach, going back to your comment about 1917 and Dunkirk, I think this film, I would land this closer in a recommendation to a Hurt Locker, a Full Metal Jacket, because it's more so being critical about war itself, where 1917 Dunkirk, it's about heroics. It is a proper war film in that it's about being a hero, where this is more so looking at war itself, and obviously under a critical light with that.
I don't hate that comparison. I don't necessarily know if I would agree or how I look at the films in general.
Sure.
I still pair this to the 1917 and the Dunkirk.
Right.
And really, it's just because of style, how good they are.
Right. Also, production of the battlefield. I would say.
Quality of war filmmaking, basically.
Yeah.
Whether it be World War II, like Dunkirk, or the World War I with 1917 and this. Yeah, it was hard not to kind of juggle that in your head. And one thing I also had was was very conflicted in the past 2 weeks to figure out what score to give this myself. So it was fun.
Okay.
A big thing was this might be product of just bad timing or something like that. I feel like I would have enjoyed it even more had this come out before the other two films.
Oh, sure.
My issue is there was something dazzling, there was something extra to Dunkirk, to 1917, that really brought you to the edge of your seat. And it doesn't necessarily mean something crazy going on screen. It could be like there was something just slightly different with camera motions, with cinematography.
Sure.
And I even almost with The Revenant as well. Just the beautiful notion of filmmaking.
Yep.
I just feel like we're getting that in a lot of war films lately.
Yeah, yep.
So it's tough for me to sit here. It's like I want to knock it because it didn't have this dazzling effect, but at the same time, it could just be a product of being third in line.
Yeah,
you know,
it's true. It's true. And also, maybe while we're a little bit worn out on World War I, World War II as a setting as well.
Yeah. Would you agree with me that there wasn't anything visually striking when you look at Revenant or 1917 or Dunkirk? These are films that were beautiful looking, as is All Quiet on the Western Front, but there were elements of it that were visually interesting, unique, and you had some great one-shot pans.
Yes.
In 1917,
yes.
Great battlefield runs as well.
Yeah.
With Dunkirk, it was just unbelievable. This flipping back and forth between three different things, and some interesting cinematography and camera work as well, big time.
I mean, Nolan was great with the use of time and the ticking of the clock. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Revenant with just some of the crazy shots that were made there and how they did it with all natural lighting. There's something that did give it a bit of an edge. This, to me, was a beautiful film, a visually striking film for sure, but it didn't have an essence of something new brought to the table.
I definitely on my notes of kind of the brutality, I enjoyed how there was a quietness that kind of came over the battlefield in some sections. A lot of quiet moments in the film are just reviewing how the destruction on the battlefield. In that probably most reminds me of 1917 because there was a similar aspect there to the heroics of him running across the battlefield,
Sure.
and especially when he comes, in night, kind of his night operations to it. I would say though this film was, I thought it was pretty striking. I mean, maybe what you're feeling is that it's a German production. Maybe it's a bit different there.
Yeah, I don't want to take away from it, and I think that's just a testament to how good that uniqueness and incredible that eye candy of Dunkirk in 1917.
Yeah.
This was a beautiful film. I don't want to knock it, but it's just the fact that it didn't do anything. I didn't see anything new, I guess.
Sure.
And that was the only thing, maybe just stepping aside from those two others, that's all.
Maybe other than its brutality, because I feel like this is definitely the most brutal out of all of them.
Yes, okay, yeah. For sure.
I think there's a certain scene that the brutality does meet that striking visuals. It's a war story. There are going to be tanks rolling up at some point, and specifically in this this story, that is where I would point to that this can hang with the big boys.
With the big, yeah. So. And I do think it hangs.
Yeah,
I do think it hangs
for sure.
My only thing is it one rung lower on the ladder.
Yeah,
and it's a very good ladder.
Listen,
it's a very good ladder.
It's the best ladder you can find. But I think I do ultimately agree with you because this is, Dunkirk and 1917, both identical scores on the ratings, and this is coming in slightly lower. So I think we are on the same page.
Yeah, and I bring Revenant into that not just because it's one of my favorite movies, but talking on cinematography in the modern era and camera placement and just movement of the camera. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Those three films really strike a chord.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Revenant with such surreal scenes as well. Such a highlight there. But honestly, identical. And in the concept here, we're following a young group of friends caught up in that fantasy of glory, and with plenty of national pride, but shattered almost immediately is when they arrive on the Western Front. I would say, again, where I put praise into this film and specifically a higher rating than the original, which may be kind of sacrilegious, but it's what I'm feeling and what I believe as well. In watching both of these films side to side, the focus never leaves the sight. We're constantly having the dream shattered for our protagonists. That fantasy is consecutively shattered again and again and again. And I appreciated this way of executing the story rather than the mixed tone of the original so much more. The action and atmosphere are a big highlight for me over the original as well. This film holds no punches on how brutal the combat of World War I was. And a perfect example is in the opening sequence. If you want to test this for yourself, there is just a abundance of chaos and brutality, but there's, like we've noted already, there's kind of tranquil moments to the film as well.
Yes.
Maybe it's tranquil in the quietness of death. It's still grim, but there is tranquil moments to it, whether it's a scarred battlefield or a field untouched by the war. So,
and I think those moments are necessary to carry you through that full 2.5 hours.
Yes.
But it's still
kind of a reset button almost.
Yes, but it never takes you out of. It will never take you out of the grimness of war.
Yeah.
Ever. And but even though you have those moments, definitely like you said, I didn't watch the original, but there was never ever any moment where there was such an imbalance of going from horrors of war to elated happiness to horrors of war. Those happiness moments, tough to say they're really happy, for sure.
Or even just getting it confused a little bit for the audience. I mean, not saying that you can't pay attention through it, but one of our characters gets injured in the original one, and he's very rah-rah, let me get back at him, fix me up, doc, and that doesn't tell the right story. That's not conveying the right message, And certainly in similar type of hospital medic scenes in this one, I mean, it's a whole nother game. So in a very good way, I was finding this film to be a much better execution than the original. And again, yes, I did watch it first. So if there's a bias there, possibly, but there's...
I think the bias comes from watching in 22.
Exactly.
And I think that's, and that's okay because the whole point is what's it like in the here and now.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where my one note for the originals review is, I was really challenged with the watching in modern day type of assumption.
Yeah.
I really kind of pushed it, especially with these two being compared side by side. So I would say, a very interesting soundtrack as well, more modern than expected for a period piece, and a lot of just bangs and smashes on percussion. I was really digging it. Also, the sound design in general I felt was excellent here. The Foley work of the recording of ambience in scenes I thought was very impressive. If anything, so much so that kind of a misstep to have this a digital release in Netflix. I would have loved to watch this in a theater with a good sound system behind it.
I was thinking, I cannot tell you how much I was thinking that. Now, luckily, I have an okay TV system,
Right.
but nothing. I would have loved to see this in a proper good theater.
Absolutely. IMAX or some sort of Dolby Atmos.
Dolby Atmos where it's at. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so
I agree with you on that. The music, I was almost in the beginning, I was not liking it. I was
it did seem a little cartoonish at first, right?
It was just like, here we go, Netflix, here we go. For the most part, it hits. I will say, if it's one rung down on that ladder, on that great ladder, is because there again that dazzle effect or that fresh newness that we get with the constant ticking in the back of Dunkirk. Nothing was things were redone in this. Nothing was born from this or out of this.
I think you're feeling its derivative of what's been out already.
It's tough to say. Yes, but it's tough to say derivative because it does stand. This film does stand alone.
Yeah.
It stands on its own, I should say. What did you say? Your main comment on the music was a little bit more modern than I thought.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
Not
experimental.
Not terrible, but a little surprising in areas. Yeah.
Because you're thinking it's going to be this like World War I period piece, and the music did not maybe match. It matched maybe in
it wasn't
in
right.
tone.
It wasn't like no Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? But
he's bringing out the pitchfork for Baz.
But you know what I mean? Yeah. Modern, but not. You won't be hearing groans in the theater because they chose to go down that route.
Exactly. If anything, just one last note with the sound design, just how the last 20 minutes really saved the whole thing in the original film. I would say the first 20 to 30 really cement my feelings on this film. There's a great early example where we have a segment of uniforms from the battlefield being brought and refurbished. And an early example of just how much care is put into the sound design is that we have almost an armada of sewing machines and machines ticking away that mimic the machine guns that we have on the battlefield. It was just really the first 20 minutes, especially up until when the young boys are recruited, really that's where I felt the film was in full stride. If anything, I felt this maybe rendition was a little bit too long. It does go on a touch long especially for how much we're beaten down with it, but it's a minor point because I think it is much more executed.
I think it's a good point. I will say it felt like a 2 hour and 45 or 3 hour movie.
Oh, for sure.
That it should have been 2.5 hours is what it felt like. However, it was 2 hours and 28 and probably could have knocked 15 minutes off.
Yeah.
But overall, I don't know. It's funny that you saying that in the beginning because I wasn't loving the beginning when I was watching it. But the more I thought about it was just like, what does this set up what we're about to see so well? Because it's one of really the darkest parts of the film when you actually think about it,
especially
and reflect on it.
Yeah, especially in the tools of war being repurposed for the next generation coming to the Western Front.
Yes.
It was very grim.
And if only these four boys knew the first 10 minutes of the film, it just would have told everything for them, Yeah.
But we never lose that sight. That's always in the focus. And I think that's why, again, this stands leagues above the original. And again, I mean, film enthusiasts, you may crucify me for that saying that, but that really is the truth of where I'm coming from.
No. I think I'm on board. I didn't see the original, but I don't think I have to understand. This is a good movie and for good reason. Yeah,
absolutely. I'll end with this. My original note for this film was that it was too brutal for its own good, and it was something that I reflected on quite a bit. I felt in ways. We've honestly talked about a lot of specific scenes, so I don't want to give too much away, just to not flirt with spoilers, but in ways I was excited originally to watch the original because I said maybe something could be done more through dialogue. Maybe something could be done through conversations with the soldiers instead of having it through action and through war. Man, I went completely 180 after watching the original and wound up appreciating this a lot more because of its commitment to the combat and to the brutality of it. I think it's really a case of a perfect storm. The German release, the horrific realities of war, and the never-breaking focus on the critical insight in how soldiers fill the boots on the battlefields. I would say this remake is worth everyone's time. We're going to go ahead and give All Quiet on the Western Front 2022 an 85.
Hey!
Another big boy.
Yes. Okay.
This is two big boys in one episode. That's a new one.
I was just like, is he going to go 79 or is he going to put it in the must-watches? Is he going to put it... I love it that you gave it an 85%.
Yeah.
I think this is the best Netflix thing made, or best film made since Beasts of No Nations.
Okay.
And I really like Beasts of No Nations.
I love that comparison.
Which was Netflix's first major film.
You're right.
And also was in theaters a little bit. Yeah. This film, I was like, what do I give it? What
are the nuances?
The more, I don't know, but...
we got Tommy Boots?
It became...
Tommy Combat Boots?
It became really a no-brainer. And the more I reflect on it, the more I enjoyed it. I can't wait to go back and watch this when I don't want to ruin my day, or just like, you know what I mean, when I'm mentally prepared for it.
Right.
But even when looking at 1917, looking at Dunkirk, all these films of such high production made kind of in recent years of themselves. Like I said, it does still stand on a great ladder.
Yeah.
And it stands on its own completely. This gets a full-on Tommy Two Shoes, two laces tied.
Two laces.
We're buttoned up and ready to go to war.
To the bootstraps.
We are ready to go.
That's
first one besides Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Right. Of course. This was a podcast for records.
I love this movie though.
Yeah,
I really, really like this movie.
Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page with this.
Do you think it's the best thing that they've done since Beasts of No Nations?
I would have to see a list.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it's certainly as far as like war and combat being a focus. I mean,
this movie
Beasts of
drug
No
you.
Nations is similar intensity to it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
a great war movie that just it just wore you down with the characters.
Yeah.
And for all the good reasons of what filmmaking is, it just transports you completely.
Absolutely, it really did. And just for folks at home, the curious, around Dunkirk in 1917, both of those are 87s for the podcast and for the website.
Right, and this got 85.
And I mean, to the point, like you said, a couple rungs. It's one or two. It's right there though. And a great watch.
I had one thought. I wish Mel Gibson waited to make Hacksaw Ridge until these films came out.
Really?
I think Hacksaw Ridge was the last war film made that you could throw in the older basket.
Oh, okay.
I did not really like Hacksaw Ridge all that much.
Yeah, I can't say it was
lazy in a lot of ways. I thought cinematography was kind of boring. There was just things about it. It's just for so many different reasons. It was lackluster. And I think Mel Gibson is actually quite good at doing some crazy stuff on film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look at Apocalypto.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
I almost think that would have been such an amazing more product if it came out after these.
Yeah, maybe just some understanding what some of the peers are doing.
Yeah. So all props to Edward Berger.
Yeah.
I hope we see more from him.
He has one other movie that I think is like a full feature release, but serious
because the production on this was ridiculous.
Yeah. I found it fascinating as well, your note of some of his incentive, or not incentive, but some of his mindset in coming to make
his passion behind it. And I think it carries through really well.
But good on Netflix.
Yeah. Good, finally.
Yeah, finally.
But now, then after watching, I'm pissed off because it's just like, y'all should, where is the billboards? Put this in theaters for a little bit. Netflix does that sometimes.
This was the same thing with you with Ring of Powers. You were like scratching your head over the advertising of it.
Ring of Powers did way better than this.
Yeah.
This deserves to be put out there. And I hope people do talk about it for Oscars. I hope there's some sort of campaign from them because we're not seeing it anywhere.
Right.
I just think it's a shame. We're in weekend number 3 coming up with this.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's been 2 weekends, and it's just like, this is an amazing movie, please, guys. And it's a huge, again, if Netflix is gonna throw money at Edward Berger to make this unbelievable, huge story and intellectual property, can you make it? Can you just do a little bit more? Shovel it out a little bit more for us. Deserves to be told. It's All Quiet on the Western Front with an 85 from Vin. A Tommy Two Shoes, two laces tied. Big week.
Oh, big week. That's what
looking at these. Yeah, like we said, we're going long, but this is a week that deserves to go long a little bit.
Absolutely.
Anything else you want to touch on? Wrap up, Vin? Roll credits? What do you want to do?
No. I mean, maybe just to reiterate that again, I was coming in very numb to film, very tired of film, and
tired of film. Uh-oh.
But my assumptions were kind of shoved back in my face when I was coming out again, not only able to recognize a good film, but experience it as good as well. So that was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. It's a huge week.
Yeah, it is a huge week.
It's unbelievable.
Vesper needs to get the boot.
Nowhere
That's
to
the only
go but
outlier.
down. Nowhere to go but down. Unfortunately for next week.
Yeah.
Vince, thank you so much for finding the time and watching these films for us. Thanks for stopping by. Folks at home, we'll run it down one more time. We have the original All Quiet on the Western Front with a 74%, Sweet Smell of Success with an 89%, Loving Vincent with a 70%, Vesper with a 55%, and All Quiet on the Western Front in 2022 with an 85%. Folks, we thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, could you give us a good rating or tell a friend about us? If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you received from us. We're looking to build this into something large and great, but also be independent from those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.